Thank you for joining us in Finding God in Video Games. Today's Rewind, we're taking a look at Plants vs. Zombies. And I will say I have a special place in my heart for the original title. I know there have been a few new releases that took the brand into a different multiplayer shooter direction, but the original for me had all the elements of the gaming experience that I was looking for. Fun and simple gameplay with a hook that allowed for experimentation and multiple ways to win, which could be enjoyed alone or with a partner. I remember the exhilaration of the combination of impending doom as zombies marched tirelessly onwards towards my little floral defense array. So I worked with a partner to balance the need for continuing resources, which were my sunflowers, with the demands of an effective defense and offense, which was the pea shooters and the melon catapults. As we each passionately explained to the other the demands of our needs in the heat of the battle, the sight of the final combatant being eliminated just in the nick of time was a feeling of relief mixed with satisfaction, working out yet another solution by the skin of our teeth, or I guess by the sunlight, as it were. There's a good reason that I'm the one that's entrusted with the resource development of planting and protecting sunflowers rather than building a defensive barricade. See, I have a great deal of difficulty investing into items that are one-time use or meant to be destroyed. Maybe it's just because I'm a really frugal person, or maybe it's because I have a sense of empathy towards a plant that's just about to be offered up for the cause of saving us, but the concept of using resources for something that is simply an obstacle that slows down invaders, it's kind of hard for me to embrace. I understand the potential impact that each of these plants will have on the battlefield, but when playing by myself, I tend to proceed with a very safe and consistent approach that involves the least amount of plant loss or resource use. My co-op partner, on the other hand, plays much more aggressively, uses a strategy that typically involves greater risk, but higher reward. While our combined efforts have proven very successful, inside I still have a difficult time committing to intentional sacrifice as a battle strategy, regardless of the success rate. I'll confess that it's hard for me many times in life to understand why the terrible things happen in the world. And many times to people I would hope would be under some form of protection from such tragedy, when innocent people suffer, when children are hurt, when even the God-fearing feel the pain that in this world that we all share. It's understandable to wonder why God doesn't simply stop the pain. Why does the omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent God of the universe allow these things to occur when we know He has the power to stop them? I know I have pondered such thoughts on many occasions. I doubt I'm alone in it. Volumes of books have been written by men and women much wiser and more articulate than I am on how a good and loving God can permit evil things to happen in this world to His children. But I do believe a very simple yet profound principle can be understood in what occurs in the tiles between a group of plants defending their lawn from the undead who would wreak havoc if they are not repelled at any cost. We have to start in the book of Acts, chapter 6, where the early church has just started to emerge as a cohesive unit. As the church grows, 7 people were chosen to provide a vital support role in the budding church infrastructure. One of these was a man named Stephen. His story doesn't last real long, just 2 short, impactful chapters in which he goes through a process of being falsely accused, given a sham of a trial, and then summarily executed by the same religious organization that had just shouted, "Crucify him" at Jesus a few months prior. As the final stone throw takes this man of God's life, a footnote in chapter 7 launches a new figure into the spotlight, a man who would one day become the Apostle Paul. But on this day, he was on the side of the angry mob who had just snuffed out Stephen's life. And what he just observed actually galvanized Paul into even more aggressive and heinous action. As if the death of this good and innocent man wasn't enough for the young church to absorb, this was a launching point for a crusade of persecution against the followers of Christ. Without so much as a break to mourn their loss, chapter 7 records the panic scattering of the believers all across the region as Paul and those who were supporting him began a campaign of terror, seeking out Christians in their homes, in their hiding places, and arresting them. But what appears to be a failure on the part of God to protect His sheep from attack was actually all part of His plan to spread the good news of Christ. throughout the world. See, it was through this threat that the message of Jesus was now being dispersed to regions that would never have heard it otherwise. And this experience was also the catalyst for bringing the misguided Paul into the fold, as his murderous campaign brought him into an intersection of confrontation with Christ on the road to Damascus and changed the entire world. It was witnessing the death of Stephen that placed Paul on a course that would change his destiny and lead him to become the most prominent missionary and evangelist for our faith of all time, and inspired almost all of the books that comprise the New Testament. It was the necessary but painful sacrifice of one life that launched all of these actions into place, saving millions of souls in the process, mine included. There are parallels in Stephen's death to the crucifixion of Christ, and the reality is that the message of the gospel has in its foundation the blood and sacrifice of all who have gone before us. It's in the DNA of our belief system, and it is through this that the kingdom advances. The paradoxical nature of pain and sacrifice, giving way to new life and joy, is observed in every time a seed is planted and dies to become something more. Every time a mother endures the pain of labor to add a new soul to our planet. Every time a believer's hard-earned testimony inspires another to join the faith. Stephen's life was not wasted. It was invested. And while it did not feel like a victory at the time, even for quite a while afterwards, now that we have the benefit of viewing this through nearly 2,000 years of hindsight, it is clear how his sacrifice, tragic as it was, birthed the expansion of Christianity across the globe. Now, I know hearing this may not provide a lot of comfort to those of us who are enduring pain and loss right now. I would never dare to insult another's crisis with a phrase that's as trite as, well, don't worry, God's in control, without balancing it with the reality that we may never understand the impact of the events of our lives within our lifetimes. When God answered the cries of Job for understanding in the midst of his circumstances, God's answer was void of the comforting reassurance that it would be all right. Instead, he challenged Job to change his view and recognize that as the architect of all time and space, God has more considerations than we can possibly fathom. Fortunately, I don't have to answer to the plants that I sacrifice for the greater good of clearing the board in Plants vs. Zombies. I am reminded of a phrase in what I consider the greatest Star Trek movie of all time, The Wrath of Khan, in which Spock, as he sacrificed himself for his comrades, rightly asserted that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. The needful placement of a plant, even if it involves its demise, may stem the tide of the invasion and ultimately be the turning point in victory for the entire team, even if the plant that held that critical role never gets to participate in the celebration. There are no easy answers for why so much suffering exists, because we lack the perspective that will provide clarity to why things happen the way they did. The message of Jesus, of Stephen, or modern-day martyrs for their cause, such as Dr. Martin Luther King, are all solidified in the value of the sacrifice that was made to give those messages. So I hope this inspires you to look at the world through the eyes of what has yet to have been revealed, to see that the losses we all endure serve a higher purpose than our finite lives on earth may ever reveal. Our lives are a message to others who are observing us, may be completely unknown to us, and we may change the course of history by actions that may seem inconsequential at that moment. Stephen had no idea that he was the plant that would die to change the lives of so many, and ultimately the world. There is a purpose, difficult as it may be to understand, and each of us, as the unique plants we are, play a vital role in the plan to bring souls to the saving knowledge of Jesus.